The Surgeon General is saying that parents are not okay and that this is actually a public health
nationwide public health crisis. This parenting thing is a 24-hour job. We actually have to learn how to do this job, parenting.
Yes. And we're all going to just have a great party time, but we're going to ignore the kids.
Is my parenting fails. And guess what, listeners? You can judge me all you want.
Yeah.
The most important factor to a healthy well-being is feeling connected. Welcome to From There to Here, a safe place where we will explore some of life's adventures so that you do not feel alone.
Hello, From There to Here listeners. This is your host, Shannon, and I have a guest with me today, Jess. JK.
Oh my gosh.
She didn't know I was starting that way.
No, I didn't.
Actually, I didn't either until I started talking.
Perfect.
Okay. Hello, From There to Here, listeners.
We actually don't have a guest with us here today.
We don't.
So maybe you just have to say something.
This is your co-host, Shannon, with my co-host, Jess. All right. Kicking it off with our heart lens, Jessica, as Brielle would call you. Mm-hmm. What is in your heart lens?
Oh, funny that you just did that because this is my heart lens is an appointment. Boy, Jess and I had an appointment with Angelica. I'm not sure if you... Well, I'm sure you remember our interview.
Episode number 50.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I wrote it down for our main topic here.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yes. So she was the guest in episode 50 when we talked about low demand parenting.
Yep.
I can see why you wrote this down now, knowing what our topic is today. But anyways... That's not what I talked to Angelica about with Boy Jess.
Circling back to your heart lens.
Yeah, so back to my heart lens is Angelica is actually a counselor, therapist. Mm-hmm. And so Boy Jess and I she has this method called the attunement method.
Oh.
And she does these amazing things on Instagram where she talks about each partner and basically gets in their own heads about how you got into an argument and what the person said and how that other person felt and all of these things due to their attachment style, right?
Okay.
So I was like, gosh, she's so good. And
sounds
Boy Jess and I are
fascinating.
great, but everyone has room to grow in their relationship, right? In any relationship.
Because there's no such thing as perfect.
Right. That we have said many times. So I was like, let's do one of these sessions with her to try to, just be better partners, right? So we did these assessments, sent them to her, and we had one 45-minute session with her. That's all we had, or that's all she had time for. Okay. She's so booked out. But it was absolutely incredible. She hit the nail on the head perfectly. All Jess and I did was fill out these questionnaires, and then she looked them over and then had this meeting with us. And she was basically, she's never met Boy Jess.
Okay.
But she could tell us exactly who we were, how we felt, what we said to each other in arguments, how we could not get into that stressful dynamic, right? And it was just the most
very cool,
amazing, helpful thing. I could have talked to her for hours.
That's awesome.
So shout out to Angelica and the attunement method.
Yeah.
Listeners, go have an appointment, man. She is amazing.
Sounds amazing.
So, yes.
Cool.
That's my heart lens.
I love it.
What's in yours?
Actually, okay, so we're recording today the day after Halloween, and my heart lens is just I'm not a teacher anymore.
I thought you were going to say Halloween, and I'm I love Halloween too, Shannon. But
it's just that I'm not teaching the day after Halloween, and I'm sorry to those teachers who are teaching the day after Halloween. Mm-hmm. And I just love all of you, and I'm thinking about you today, and I just am glad I'm not there.
Yeah.
Because those
were fun days.
Are stressful days. Yes. Yeah.
If you have a heart lens you would like to share with us, you know what to do. If you have been a listener for, we're at like 60, almost 70 episodes now. Go on our website, podcastfromtheretohere.net, and let us know so we can share in upcoming episodes. Shannon and I have listened to another podcast, actually, that was called The Parents Aren't All Right.
The parents aren't all right.
And not like right, wrong. Like they're not all right. They're not okay.
They're not okay.
Doing well.
We're not doing okay, people.
The Surgeon General is saying that parents are not okay and that this is actually a public health,
nationwide public health crisis.
So this is an interesting thing, I think, for you and I, especially to be talking about, Shannon, because like we fought
so hard to be a part of this public health crisis. Yes.
And
we wanted into the club so bad.
Yeah. And I actually, after listening to the podcast that we listened to, like totally feel it.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
That it's, like a lot being a parent.
A lot.
Like,
it is.
I wouldn't change it. I want to be one, clearly very much. But it's also like a lot, right?
Yeah. We will link that podcast episode in our podcast's description if you also want to go back and listen to it in more in depth. Jess and I are going to try to do like a very short, brief synopsis of this because we kind of want to dive in and talk about maybe how our feelings are. But because the podcast is titled From There to Here, we're going to talk about the from there first. So as Jess said, our Surgeon General has an advisory warning out there. It's a nationwide public health crisis that today's parents aren't okay because we are too stressed, and not like from baseline what I guess he or they or whatever consider normal, but so stressed that it's become a public health crisis. Yeah. And they're calling it intensive parenting.
Yes. And I guess I like that they addressed this in the episode. They were like, wait, is everybody intensive parenting? Is it across
economical status, cultural status, racial?
And the answer is yes. Yes, it is.
This is now what is considered to be the best or the norm, or everyone feels the pressure, so everyone's striving to do that. They said like it's not necessarily on top of everybody's mind, but because it's kind of in the air.
Yeah.
That's why every parent is kind of dealing with this type of stress called intensive parenting.
And it's because we feel that our kids need to be constantly enriched and constantly engaged. And the example that they gave in the episode made me actually laugh out loud because I literally do it. And I do it every flippin' day this fall. The example was, like when you're taking your kid for a walk in the woods, you as a parent feel as if it is your job to be like
all the time.
Look at the leaves.
To make sure they're engaged all the time.
Like they're changing colors. Notice how they're falling on the ground. And then I start singing a song. And then it's like, let's count the leaves. And it's like this pressure, right? To be constantly teaching your child. And I don't know about you, Shannon. Like, do you feel that? Like, not only as a teacher, but
that's what I was like, man, this is what everybody feels. I thought this was just me because I'm a teacher, but no.
Right.
This parenting thing is a 24-hour job.
It is. And I agree. Like, I thought it was, I'm a teacher, so my brain does this stuff.
Yes.
I always am teaching Jude because this is how I operate around young children.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I think what we learned in this podcast episode was that that's not true. It's everybody.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's important for us, like Shannon had alluded to earlier, we wanted to give a summary. And one of the things that they talked about in the podcast that we listened to was like the history of parenting. And one thing that really stood out to me was that what they were saying is that in the 70s, parenting was a noun.
Oh, yes.
Like you are a parent.
Yeah.
You're not doing things with your kids as much. You're with them and they're around you, but like you're just a parent.
It wasn't like, right. So the noun, the parent versus the verb parenting.
Yes. Which they said in the 80s is when parenting becomes a verb. And this was also after the women's movement.
Yep.
They talked about in the podcast episode, and then how like after the women's movement, obviously women are now working outside of the home. The government at that time was not providing any support.
Like family paid leave, subsidies, childcare subsidies, things like that.
So like there wasn't a community feel around being a parent. It was just like you're doing this alone, right?
Yes. So then in the 80s.
Yes, the parenting becomes a verb now.
Now
right?
it's parenting. Yes, we become a verb.
We feel like we have to like listen to experts, helicopter parenting.
So this is like when they said like a bunch of like parenting books were starting to be written, and we're not really like trusting our own gut as parents anymore, feeling more like we actually have to learn how to do this job, parenting.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, like the helicopter parenting started to become more of like a thing because there was this fear of like abductions are going to happen.
Yeah. And I don't know, I remember as a child, like watching, what it was
America's Most Wanted.
Yes. Watching America's Wanted.
Yes.
Like, and
Cops.
also there was the guy with his child got kidnapped, right? And he was the guy on the show.
I think that's the America's Most Wanted.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that happened. And like, I can remember my parents like having conversations with them as an adult now. Like, oh yeah, back then there were abductions, but really
that was like a scare tactic.
It was. And like kids stopped, what the podcast taught me was that kids were stopping playing in the streets, and just parents became helicopter parents because they felt that they needed to keep their child safe. Yeah. Right.
And I don't know, but if it was like a trickle down effect, or if this happened in bigger cities first and then kind of came to my little town of Waunakee. But when I was growing up, I still like rode my bike around town. I was still playing down at the parks in 6 Mile Creek, building forts by myself. Like I was
supervised,
and I didn't have a cell phone, right? Yeah. Like that wasn't a thing, right?
Or
so
a pager.
I still like remember doing that. However, America's Most Wanted, the Cops show, all those commercials, like, oh, do you know where your children are? Right? Those things were happening. So it wasn't necessarily like about the teaching. It was more about the protecting in the 80s.
Yes.
As opposed to now.
Well, and one more thing I wanted to say about I do remember riding my bike. I was definitely outside a lot, but I do feel like my parents like had tabs on me pretty. I wouldn't call them helicopter parents, but like they knew where I was for sure.
Yeah, I imagine my parents did.
And I remember my dad, like he still says to me, this is like a mantra always ingrained in my brain the rest of my life, is like, be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of your surroundings. And like, it's interesting thinking like these 80s parents may have felt like anxious right around parenting. And it's funny like how...
Now has intensified that.
Like the child of that generation of parenting, a lot. I'm not just saying me as an individual, but like a lot of people my age struggle with anxiety. Yeah. So I don't know. That didn't come up in that podcast.
Their fault.
But it's something that I thought about. Okay, but moving on then to the 90s. Brain science came out about early development. We learned about the ACEs, which we talked about previously.
Episode number 35.
Right.
When we guest interviewed Terri.
The number, people started to know the number of words you needed to say to your child so that they would develop appropriately.
Or like we're playing baby Mozart now.
Yes,
and
the classical music.
We think we have all this power as parents over and like this responsibility
to like do the very best job.
Yeah, because we are so responsible for their earlier outcomes so that their later outcomes, they go to college, they get a good job, they're very well educated, they do better than us. Yeah.
Right. And there was like the pressure, right? To like want your kids to do better, right? You want your kids to succeed, but it almost has shifted from like just what happened in America. Like, I don't know, Dr. Phil would always say, rise above your raisin. Like, have you heard him say that?
This is not sponsored.
I don't know
Dr.
if I've ever talked about Dr. Phil on this podcast, but like,
rise above your raisin.
for a very long period of time was like, he's the smartest man in the world. He knows everything. That's one he'd say, rise above your raisin. But that was something that in America was just naturally happening.
Yes.
And in that 80s to 90s, I think the podcast said that in the 90s, like the shift started happening that like,
we're wanting to like, we have all this like anxiety around economical status. So then therefore we want our children to be better than us. We put this pressure and importance on getting good grades and going to college.
Yes.
And how do we make sure that happens? Well, we listened to baby Mozart in the utero and now we have intensified
and it becomes more of a worry.
Yeah. This is when like the birth to 3 came about and early intervention is so important. And
which as a teacher of early childhood, I very much believe in that.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah.
I totally
So we went
feel all
from
of that.
parent a noun, parenting a verb, to we need to protect our child, parenting as protecting. Now it's parenting as we are teachers.
Yeah, pretty
that's
much,
kind of like how the
get
flow
as much
went.
information as you can. And then another thing that really stood out to me in the podcast episode that Shannon and I listened to is that there's this statistic that working mothers today actually spend as much time with their children as stay-at-home moms in the 70s.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. So currently that's the pressure that's on.
Yeah. Like the guilt.
And specifically, it just said moms. I think it's because they're comparing them to the stay-at-home moms in the 70s. Right. But I imagine, and maybe we can have the boys do a steal at Mike on this topic. But yes, I imagine they also have and feel pressure. And
I know I like. Sure. I put. I'll be like, you need to spend time with him because you were just gone, and like, it's like this, fleeting time too, you know. But
and they're. And I think they're correct in like the assumption that we have these feelings around guilt because we don't get to spend all this time with them. And I know there's so many posts on Facebook about we only get 18 summers, blah, 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 blah. And I always just roll my eyes at those. I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast, but it's like, that is why we're feeling the guilt. Like social media is really laying it on there. But
and like moving further, right? Like out of the 90s into now we're into the 2000s, right? And like social media starts happening.
Yeah.
So now parents are not only having all those layers of, you know, protect, learn all the things, teach, but now compare yourself to the people posting only the most perfect social media posts. Like maybe you feel judged on your parenting, but also you log on there and you're like, the experts are all telling you exactly how to parent.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's now like we're becoming insecure. We're feeling judged, feeling less than.
It's like just
not measuring up to that social media post.
Yes.
That most often they snapped the picture and now they're, you know, having an argument with their toddler too. Right.
Yeah. But you don't see that part.
No.
So, I mean, you can definitely see how over time from the 70s till now, like parenting has become intense.
And I think what the Surgeon General was saying why this is a nationwide public health crisis is because as parents now because we're parenting intensely, our mental health is affected. We're getting less sleep, less of a social life. We don't really like
I try to actually balance that.
Yeah, I think you do a great job.
You know,
unless we don't have like really an identity out of like work and parenting is what they said. And I mean, I can see that
and just time with your spouse.
Yes.
Right. Like the kids have just become involved in everything. Like some people even do work out with their children at their feet.
Right.
You know, they can't get away for a yoga class.
Yeah. Everything that we do as parents, if it's like a fun activity, we are having our kids be involved in our fun activities.
Absolutely. I just, before we started recording, I was like, oh yeah, this is the first time we've taken Jude to the Halloween party that we love. And but I mean, I'm glad we did it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they just get wrapped up in everything. But I don't know. Part of that's like what I signed up for in a lot of ways. Like I wanted my child I wanted to have a child for them to be a part of what I am doing. But I hadn't thought about the extreme other side, right?
Yeah.
But I do honestly feel like personally, I do a good job of balancing time with him in a way. But I am definitely one of those people that is constantly feeling like, oh, if I'm at home, like I have to be teaching him and doing something with him, though.
So there was an example of like they're watching TV and now it's being like recommended that we parents watch TV with them so that we can stop and we can talk about the programming and we can teach as they're like supposed to be watching TV and just like kind of having a free time in their life. I don't do that. I mean,
you don't?
No, I will do the dishes or clean.
Do you feel guilty then?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
How do you not feel guilty?
I think maybe if I look back, I would have felt guilty with Brielle. Okay. But like knowing that like,
so like more children maybe helps you like, loosen up.
And knowing like they have a play partner, like they can play. Brielle, I have really tried to instill independence, which is interesting because that is one of the things that they were talking about is how it's not only affecting the parents' mental health, but it's actually like the lack of independence is affecting the children because they don't know how to problem solve, right? Like their independence is being affected too. And I will say she's gotten, I mean, I think we did a good job on that factor. Like she is pretty independent on some things, but not like
adding more kids. You know, I feel like my sister would agree with that too. Like you add more kids and like you just can't care as much because not that you don't care as much, but like
there are some things you have to like be okay with and be flexible about. Yeah. They're going to be watching TV and I'm not going to sit there and pause the show and talk to them about the show or enjoy it with them. But
they would now. Another positive, not another, but a positive thing does come out of intensive parenting is that like obviously kids are getting a lot of great information and they are learning, right? And they did say that the young adults then have great relationships with their parents.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was a positive thing that comes, that came out of it. I thought it was interesting that the podcast episode ended with like, kind of the Surgeon General saying, you know, like parents should not feel guilty.
Oh yeah, here are the solutions.
How?
Yeah,
like one of the solutions was like should not feel guilty. Like
be calm, stay calm, like, calm your control. Right from episode 3.
Like that's actually not just a that's helpful. Not a strategy. But what do you think aside just having more children?
I don't know. Right?
Okay,
I do know. I think. Like one of the other solutions was like needing more community spaces, but like, I don't know necessarily about like needing the spaces. We have libraries and we have great parks and things in the Madison area. I think as adults, not even just parents, I think as adults, we need to be more mindful and respectful and kind to one another.
Yes.
I just like,
when we're in those spaces together, like when Jude's being a little a-hole doing who knows what, not listening, right? Like don't look on and think, gosh, that mom's terrible.
That mom sucks. Yeah. I will share a story with you that happened actually last night. And I love my sister to death. And if you listen, Brittany, and you want to bring this back up to me and we can talk about it on a different time, that's fine. But she knows I love her and respect her. And
what'd she do?
Well, okay. So we interviewed my sister in episode, I don't know, what is it?
I don't know. You start telling and I'll look.
60.
Oh, good job.
So in that episode, she was just responding to another episode, number 13, about rejection. But she did share in that episode that her and Katie do not have kids. They do not want kids. So I have a question for you, Jess.
Oh,
I just think like, can people who don't have children give advice to parents?
Did Brittany give you advice?
Yes. So Halloween at my house is very big and extravagant and fun. We have lots of people over. We go trick-or-treating together. We do hot apple cider. Some people like to have alcohol with their hot apple cider. We do like a big Papa Murphy's jack-o'-lantern pizza. I make chili. It's a very big thing. We go trick-or-treating. We come back. We eat, Okay, so Riggs was extremely overwhelmed. He is my emotional one anyways. And he is mad that Brielle won't let him hand out candy. And then that becomes, I want to go visit Nicole across the street. So it's just like he's having a fit. Yes. He's very mad. Big emotions. Some people would call it a tantrum. So my sister was like, you need a calming space in your house. And I was like, well, their calming space is their bedroom. Like, that's why we don't have toys in the bedroom. It's their calming space. I want them to be safe in their room. And she's like, well, you could do like, zones of regulation. And I just kind of stopped, right? Like, it's fine. Yeah. I mean, later on, I did tell her, like, Riggs can't just go in a calming spot by himself. He just turned 5. We use co-regulation. We do that with him. It does work quite well when it's just our family of 5, but there's a lot of sensory overload right now, a lot of things going on. There was a lot of excitement today. He's probably crashing, right? But Ben very much was like, you can't give me a parenting advice. You don't have kids. Yeah. What's your take on it?
I don't know. I feel like everyone comes to life, right, with their own
Everybody comes out of the womb.
And then their own like perception of what's happening. And sometimes hearing from someone else's perception of what's happening may or may not be helpful, right? But like, I've totally had experiences where people that are not parents have told me how to manage Jude's behavior, which sometimes can be intense, and that annoys the fucking shit out of me. That's what happens to me. Because I'm like, okay, he's my kid and I know him, so leave me the fuck alone. Yes. That's usually what I'm thinking in my head, but it's not what I say out loud.
And it's and it's not helpful in this time because I can't explain to you what's happening as my toddler is having big emotions.
Yes. And another thing that annoys me, and now we're gonna get way off topic here, is when I'm trying to do the parenting of my child who might be having some big emotions, and then other people freaking swoop in and start saying things and doing things. Yeah. And I'm just like, please shut the fuck up. I've swore a lot during this little segment because I get fired up about it. Like, leave them alone. Anyway.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah. I get that.
But parenting is intense.
It's intense. And I do think like sometimes the outside judgments are not helpful for my stress level. I think I can take it from my sister because it's my sister, but not other people.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, if I ask for your opinion, I want your opinion and suggestions.
Right.
And it's interesting that I say just my sister because actually, like, I feel very strongly that like Brielle's biological aunt Angie is my sister as well. And so like it doesn't bother me if she doesn't either. But I think it's hard when you have the outside judgment. So like my friend, I think we just have this like my friends. You might be
looking at it as judgment, right? So it might be about shifting, you know, like that's why I'm like, you know, another perception of what's going on sometimes might be helpful because they're not there all the time. And I think it's about how you say it and when you say it. But I think there's just been like this unspoken rule in my friendship group that we don't give each other parenting advice unless we ask, right? Like that's just the respect we give each other. Like I know I suck at that. Like if people come to me with a problem and don't ask for a solution, I'm oftentimes giving a solution. I can't stop myself. But then I'm like, also, that's actually my job, right? Like, which is interesting, right? Like my job is to go into schools and consult. And sometimes for case managers, special education teachers who don't really want my advice, but their director thinks they need it, right? Yes.
So it's interesting because I am one on the other side of the table then. Expert. No.
Yeah.
Okay, so
anyway,
do you think like when you have date nights with Jess or when you have a girls' night, have you ever like had that guilt?
Like
gone on a vacation with girls?
If I'm having a boring time,
okay,
then I will be like, oh, this is not worth my time right now.
Away from Jude.
Yes. And there have been boring times. But if I'm having a fun time, I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Okay.
I love my girls' time.
Yes. Yeah.
I love my date night. Yeah. Like we have stuff scheduled for this weekend and I'm excited about it. Like, and as he's gotten older, that's gotten easier. Because when he was a baby, I felt totally guilty.
Sure.
But yeah, what about you?
It's definitely shifted. I can remember like we had a girls' day and most of them were doing like a girls' day and then night. And I opted to just do the day thing because I wanted Brielle so bad. I finally had Brielle. She was about 1 at the time, maybe a little bit older. And I was definitely not going to be away from her that long. I had never been away from her from a night. So I definitely was like not doing it.
Yep.
When the boys were about 1, I'm trying to think, 1-ish. All of us went to Fort Myers for 5 days. And initially I walked out of my house crying to get into the car to go to the airport. But as soon as like, again, like you're having fun.
Yeah. You can get distracted.
Way easier. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. In a good way.
Yeah. So I think I don't have that now. And it's interesting to say that and feel that because of
I remember how you were with like.
Yeah. And my girlfriends were very much like, you have to do this, Shannon. Like you have to get out. You have to be away from them. And I was like, no thanks.
Right.
Like how can you be away from your kid? But
and as an adoptive parent, I don't know if you felt this too, but like for me at the beginning with Jude, I was like, I have to be very sure that he knows and feels within his soul that I am not leaving.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely,
like Brielle and like Jude, like we did not get them at birth.
Right.
So it was very important.
And like Jude was with biological parents, then foster parents, right? Where like, Brielle was like biological mom. We don't know if it's biological dad. Grandparents, right? Like, so yeah.
Like you just wanted to make sure that baby felt very safe, grounded and safe and established. And maybe more we felt that. And I don't know if it's more or not because of that background. Yeah. But I don't know. But
how do you
think that overall I do a pretty good job of balancing like doing the things and like going to my own workouts and all of that and like not feeling guilty about it. But I like they had alluded to in the other podcast was that like there's not this community vibe anymore maybe in our culture around parenting, which is not something that I experience. I very much like you, Shannon, have a community. My parents literally live in the lower level of our house. My sister is at my house almost every single day. Boy Jess actually calls our house a community center.
Oh, yeah.
Not in a good way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But anyway, like that vibe of not having a community and like I don't feel like I'm doing it alone. So I can very easily go away for the weekend because Jude's gonna have a sleepover with his aunts and his cousin. Like it's fun for everybody. So
yeah. No,
like, do you agree
absolutely
with that? Like,
and I feel like I don't. That's just how I grew up, though, too. We very much have a very close, tight-knit family and lots of, like, family friends. Our door was never locked. Nobody ever knocked coming into the house. They just walked in. Yes. And so it's like that at my house, right? Like, you just walk in. Yes. It's weird if you knock. So I don't know.
Yes.
But you definitely, like, couldn't do my parenting job without my community.
Right.
I think potentially
like, can you imagine?
I mean, that I am imagining if it were different and I didn't have it, the parenting intensity feelings and the stress would be more.
Totally. And we still feel it.
Yeah.
Like, especially the guilt. I think you and I maybe shared that, not as much now, but anyway, I would say like, I don't know if you're ready to go to your biggest takeaway from that podcast and this, but I have one.
Okay.
I literally listened to that other podcast and I spent it was like, I think on a Friday, a whole weekend. I was like, I'm going to do whatever I want. I like did my nails. I did some like housework things, some yard work that I wanted to. And I was like, Jude, you can just go do whatever the hell you want to do. And I'm not teaching you a damn thing. You are going to learn it yourself. So I'm not kidding. Like that's how I felt after listening to that episode. It was so empowering. And the other part that I felt was I need to get together with like my friends and get with our kids to a cabin, and we're all going to just have a great party time, but we're going to ignore the kids.
Okay, I want to go.
So
my kids wouldn't ignore me though. Yeah. That would be the problem. Oh yeah.
Those are my takeaways. That's what we need to do to be better parents.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to like the heart lens that you were like talking about Angelica Shiels, but in episode 50 when she was kind of describing her parenting of more of that like free range parenting, low demand parenting, things like that, right?
Yeah.
That was right. And that was my biggest takeaway.
Kind of, that in a way, like feels like I'm being naughty. I'm being bad parent if I'm not.
Yes.
But I'm like, wait a second. No, this is okay.
Yes. Yeah. Allowing them more choice and freedom. And
I'm still not going to let him pick out his clothes.
Okay. Yeah. Actually,
I think I
don't
talked
know
about
what
that
episode that was, but like after the episode, I'll just remind everybody. I had told everybody that I pick out Brielle's clothes.
Yes.
And after the episode, one of my girlfriends, after she had listened to it, was like, "You need to just kind of let that go. Like, let her be her own person." And this year she is actually like, she'll maybe wear like the pants I pick out, but then a different shirt. Or on the weekends, I'll say you need long sleeves and long pants. It's a little bit chilly out. Bad parenting moment. I'll share.
Let's hear it.
So it was just this past weekend. She came out. I don't really remember what we were going to be doing or if I told her you need pants and a long sleeve shirt. But she came out with these tight biker shorts, like spandex shorts.
Okay.
Very like pink, lots of pattern on them, and a blue shirt that did not match at all. And I just was going to let it go. Like, I just was going to let it go. It was fine.
It's big for you.
I was then doing the dishes, so my back was turned to her. She comes out of her room, and Ben is like, "What are you wearing?" And she was like, "What?" And he goes, "Have you shown your mom what you're wearing?" So I turn around, and she now has put boots on.
Okay.
I could not. I turned around, and I held my laughter together as best I could. I was crying laughing the way that she looked. It was freaking ridiculous. Did you wear it? So then I was, of course, like, she knows that we're like making fun of her.
Okay. Yes.
I'm trying to cover it up by just being like, "I'm laughing at your dad. He doesn't know fashion. You look great." She went and changed. And I was like, "You didn't have to change. You looked great."
Similar story. My best friend Stacy. I'm telling the story. I hope this is okay. Her son got a haircut that was so bad that she like made a comment that he then was he realized it, and then he wanted a haircut, and then she felt bad because she's like, "I didn't want him." And like,
yes,
you can like your haircut.
I know. I felt so bad.
I cannot like your haircut. Yes. But yes.
But I shouldn't laugh at you, and I'm really sorry I did. But like, same thing happened that like when we were going to the pumpkin patch. I was like, "I'm just going to let you wear these ridiculous boots to the pumpkin patch. And you're just going to, we get there." And my mom's like, "Why are you wearing those boots? You need to be wearing tennis shoes at a pumpkin patch." And I was like, I told her, but she wanted to wear them. So now she's going to reap the consequences of wearing these freaking boots. Yeah. And they were not like hiking boots, people. These were like black, tall fashion boots. Oh my gosh. Anyways, my parenting fails. And guess what, listeners? You can judge me all you want because I am trying my best over here.
You know what? And that actually leads me to our inspirational quote that I used to use all the time with like teachers that I would co-teach with. But I feel like this works here too. Okay. And it is, all you can do is your best. Thank you for listening and being a part of our community. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
If you'd like to connect, we can be reached at podcastfromtheretohere@gmail.com. We hope you continue on this journey with us.